We are going to learn today the fifth essay in Kuntres Achrim. This essay is a continuation of the thought of the previous essay. We will do the entire essay today. It deals with reincarnation and the need for a soul to come back. We learned this concept previously. Go into more details in today. That concept of reincarnation. So when it comes to Torah study, we learned previously that there is a concept of refinement, because Torah study is explaining the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs themselves are done in the physical world, and therefore, just as the physical objects have become refined by doing the mitzvah with them, likewise, the study of the idea behind the mitzvah also brings a refinement to the spiritual aspect of the mitzvah. Now, what happens, though, if you're studying something that never occurred? It's a law. It never occurred. Or, for example, when Mashiach will come, we'll study Torah, but then with the spirit of impurity removed from the world, all negativity removed from the world, then the law of Pigul, which is having a wrong thought about bringing an offering to God, in other words, you're thinking the wrong thing about what your actions are. You know, sometimes our actions are not in tune with our thoughts. You could do one thing and you're thinking another thing. That's a no-no. Right? That's when we live on autopilot. That sometimes happens. So, well, that will not happen when Mashiach comes. We'll be attuned to the divine to such a degree that we won't have one thought and our actions are doing something else. So, therefore, this particular law that is speaking about this concept of having one thought that is not in sync with what your actions are won't exist, right? So therefore, there won't be any form of refinement. So the Alter Rebbe explains like this. So in other words, why do you need to study that? And if it's a law of something that never occurred, the Alter Rebbe doesn't bring this here, but other places in the Talmud, there's an argument if the rebellious son, Ben Sura Morer, if that ever occurred. Perhaps it's a law in the Torah, but actually never was implemented. So then, where is the refinement in learning that concept if in reality it never occurred in this world? So Alter Rebbe explains like this. Every prohibition in the Torah has its root source in a life above. It's a prohibition, means it's a negative force, so it has its source in the negative force above, which is klipa. A reminder, what does it mean above? It means it comes ultimately from a divine source that devolves into a negative divine energy, and that law is rooted in that negative divine energy, right? Otherwise, it could not exist in this world without a flow of divine energy that comes from above. Something that we've mentioned many times, and we'll mention again, that there's only one God. That means there are not two forces, meaning there isn't the Godhead and the anti-God, or God and Satan. And there's a duality. The world that we see, there is a duality. And that's what led many people to believe that there is the dual forces of good and evil, light and darkness, and so on. So the truth is there isn't a duality. I mean, there's a perceived duality, of course, but it's all Hashem Echad. It's the oneness of God. So Klippa comes from the divine wisdom above. It devolves. It's a now force that is not recognizing as its source, and we've gone through this at great length previously. But it is a force from above that therefore, if anything that we do down here, even a simple thing of, as crinkling your hair, right? Not as an act of holiness, but just an act of, self-indulgence. The power to do that comes from above, from the Klippa, the source of Klippa above, which that source of Klippa comes from the divine wisdom ultimately, and from Ein Sof, from the limitlessness of God. What does that mean to say? That anything that is down here is rooted and sourced above. So a prohibition in the Torah has its root in the spiritual realm above, in Klippa, right? Now, it may be that it never devolved into this world, that particular divine energy of a teachings of the Torah that tells us about a prohibition, like Pigel, we gave an example, or the rebellious son. So perhaps it never devolved and is reflected in the physical, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a spiritual source. It does. The spiritual source is a reality. And again, that spiritual source of Klippa, of that negative, that shell that covers over on the divinity. What is the divinity? What's the source of the divinity? The source of the divinity is supreme, supernal wisdom of God, which is the source of all of vitality, of all of existence, as we've explained previously, because it is the first of the 10 divine attributes. It is the funnel, or the conduit of the Ein Sof, of the limitlessness of God, that brings vitality into this world. And it brings vitality then to, and here we're speaking specifically, of course, of anything of vitality in this world, but here we're specifically speaking about Torah teachings. So therefore, any innovation in Torah wisdom that a student will come up with, like the Alter Rebbe's teachings of Tanya, is innovative. Or any other rulings in Jewish law, or whatever, innovative understanding, it is rooted in the supreme wisdom. That supreme wisdom is the conduit for the Ein Sof, the limitlessness of God. So the limitlessness of God will have a flow of divinity that will be ongoing in Torah teachings that will always, continue. And it's not just in adjudication of law, but even in the questions, as we have in the Talmud. Rebbe Yirmiyah posed hypothetical questions and possibilities that were so beyond that at one point he was even escorted out of the house of study because, his questions were, so hypothetical and not practical. The point being, though, that even if it's hypothetical and non-practical, it still has a root source in the spiritual realms above. And they were given to Moses at Sinai. It's part of, and it needed to be unraveled, revealed at later generations. The seed was given then, and the elaboration, the growth of that seed into a teachings of Torah, sprouted over time. But again, this is Torah teachings, the wisdom of the laws of the infinite of God in every particular law. Now, that law that is supreme wisdom, again, that is a conduit for the infinite of God, is then expressed in Malchus. Malchus is royalty, kingship. That's the king rules with his word, as wisdom founds the daughter. And it's expressed, the daughter meaning Malchus, the feminine aspect of the divine speech, and therefore it is elucidated in the oral Torah. That oral Torah is then or comes down from Malchus, which Malchus, we've learned this idea, is the expression. Everything, the vitality comes from divine wisdom, but it's expressed in Malchus, as Malchus' speech, right? Just as a person has wisdom, and it might be in their head, but if they don't speak it, that doesn't become expressed. So where does the divine creative power of God become expressed? It's through Malchus. And that's expressed now in the force of the oral Torah, in the Talmud and the like, the Talmud, the Gemara, the Mishnah, and so on, that then invests itself in the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. And it's there that in the spiritual realm, when it comes down from the world of Atzilus, which is one with God, but in the world of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, which is already created spiritual worlds, but created worlds, there's a independence to it. Therefore, the shell of Klippa covers over on that teachings that it now needs to be refined. How? By me and you studying it. By me and you studying it, even though by me and you studying, we are able now, through our study, what we're doing is actually our likeness in the divine realm above is likewise studying that law, that teachings of Torah, and through that, it's refining it on the spiritual realm. I hope that was clear. The point being that Torah teachings of the infinite nature that are a conduit through the divine wisdom, that are expressed through Malchus, and Malchus, meaning the oral Torah, then gets vested in the world of Bria, the world of Gemara, comprehension, world of Yetzirah, of adjudication of law, and so on, which then brings us to how the Torah comes down into the spiritual realm, that it is entrapped in a klipa that needs refinement. And we are the ones who have to refine it. How? By studying, extracting the holy spark that's there, elevating it through our study. How? By understanding the concept, taking it out of its, when sometimes you don't need to understand something. You know why? Because such a clarity. That's not probably too often. That it's just you see it without any explanation. Sometimes we see things without an explanation. We get it right away. And sometimes we need explanation. Why do we need explanation? Because it's trapped. It's not obvious. The spark of holiness and godliness, of truth, is not revealed. So we have to use our minds to engage, to understand. And through that understanding, we break that outer shell that's not allowing me to grasp and connect to the divine spark that's there. That is birurim, that is refinement that we engage in. Even if it's a matter of Torah teaching that has no material bearing in this world, because it never happened even, or never will happen. It doesn't matter. By the study of it, we are engaged in revealing that spiritual spark of godliness that's entrapped. Now, here's the point. I mean, no, that is the point. As a result of this, if we fail to complete our mission in study of Torah on the three dimensions of our soul that are within us, nefesh, ruach, and neshama, thought, speech, and action on one level of studying Torah, then our soul needs to come back, because we didn't refine all those elements that are necessary for us to refine, that are the 288 sparks that are, they will complete the structure of our soul. Because our soul is made up, as we've learned, of 613 components, categories, parts. And that's why there's 613 commandments of the Torah. Because each one of the commandments is refining a different component of my soul, compartment of my soul. So I need to study all those areas and do the mitzvahs also. But here it's particularly we're speaking about in reference to the study of Torah. That when I study those areas, then I will refine that part of my soul. Now, that's now, in the time to come, when Mashiach will come, the study of Torah will not be in refinement anymore, because the world will be refined. The spirit of impurity will be removed from the world. And then our engagement will be in not refinement, because all of the klipa, the negative forces, the shell that is covering on the divine spark will no longer be in existence. It will be eradicated. And therefore, the presence of God in the teachings will be obvious, will be clear. So then what will be the study of Torah then? And even the prohibitions, what do we need the prohibitions for? Well, only in order to elevate and to bring sweetness into this world through that elevation. It won't be hardcore trying to break with our, we'll get it. Right now we don't get it because klipa is in our soul. Klipa is in the world around us, meaning the spark of the divine is trapped, and therefore we have to work hard to engage and to connect to the divine. But in the times of Mashiach, we'll see with our eyes, and therefore we'll still study Torah. On the contrary, we'll study a much more lofty dimension of Torah that will bring elevation after elevation. In the meantime, this is what we got to do. This is what we're into. All right. All right, folks. Thank you. A reminder that I have a class tonight. Best place is to get on Zoom for those who want to participate on the Zoom or want to know about other classes. Please private message me your email so we could let you in on all the other good things that are happening. A reminder that this Friday will be the conclusion of the 5 books of Tanya. But not to worry, because we will continue again with the new cycle, God willing, looking forward to concluding and to continuing. So in the meantime, please, many of you I do have your emails, many of you I don't. So let me know. Also a reminder, on YouTube, please subscribe to Tanya Rabbi, because that's where you're going to have everything forevermore. Well, also with a new website that I'm coming out with. More of that, stay tuned. And of course, sharing is caring. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you for Chabad Zichron Kadeshim in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have a wonderful day. And a good Tvach, Shavua Tov, good week.